I gotta say, dude, that was intense.
The ending of 2 different D&D campaigns sure was, Ted. Let's talk about our D&D campaigns have ended. What's next?
I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
I'm Nerdarchy Dave. Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds.
Now let's begin at the end of this video.
So, what is the premise for today's video? What the heck are these guys talking about? We are talking about not necessarily campaign endings, but about our specific campaigns that have ended. Me and Ted have both just wrapped up another 2 campaigns. Now, the way we run our games is me and Ted are basically in a Saturday night game, 3 out of the 4 Saturdays of the month. But they're all different games with different groups. The only real crossover is me and Ted. Ted runs a game, I run a game, and then, they're both D&D, and then we usually play another game that's a non-D&D game. I know, non-D&D. Can you believe it? But, so we have these monthly games, and they've been going for a while now, over a year. They both started during lockdowns, during the pandemic, and we had to play them virtually, and then we ended up finally being able to get our groups back together and play together. So what we want to talk about is kind of a little bit about those campaigns and wrapping them up, and kind of what are we going to do next.
So my game was called Repercussions, and it was totally because the way my second 5th edition campaign wound up going is it left it on this bit of a cliffhanger. So it was still an end of a story. The villain was technically dead, even if it wasn't really a defeat. But I allowed the characters to kind of flow into a new game that wanted to, or those who wanted to completely play something else, something new. It was a story beat. So at this moment, the goal of the game wound up changing. The campaign world changed, and those who wanted to bring in new players could.
Yeah, literally half the players decide to change out their characters and half decide to remain. You might be asking, how do you do that with 5 players? Well, it was half because, one of the players decided they wanted a new character in the beginning of the campaign. And then, partially through the campaign, they wanted to switch back to their old character. So they exited the new character
quite forcefully,
permanently, and then brought back their old character.
So definitely a lot of fun. So what was your game?
All right, so I ran the Court of Worms, and it is a campaign setting that I ran once before for Saver Dice, and it was like a mini series. It was only 6 episodes, and I had a lot of fun running it. And it is this very reptilian, dragon-centric campaign. Where the players are playing non-standard races mostly. There are humans in this valley that's ruled by dragon emperors and empresses, but they're not the ruling species. They're actually kind of primitive in comparative to the other cultures. Hey, you might have noticed there's a little bar below this video. It's got like hats and shirts and stuff in it. That's stuff that we make. It is Nerdarchy gear that you can go and purchase and use to support the channel and also help support your favorite nerds, or us, as the case may be. We got some cool stuff over there, some cool designs, but over on our Spreadsheet shirt store, there is even more stuff that you can take a look at, but that's a little bit of a sample of what we got. So if you want to help support the channel and grab some cool merch at the same time, down in that bar.
Rep that Nerdarchy brand. But hey, if that's not really your style and you want to help support the channel in another way to keep making awesome videos like this, as well as the great content over on nerdarchy.com, why not come check us out on Patreon and support us there?
As a special thank you, you'll receive 5e content for both players and DMs alike. We do drop-in encounters. We create magic items. Sometimes we turn them into print and play magic item cards. We make feats, spells, races, subclasses, and a bunch of other stuff as well. There's even a chance to game with us, Nerdarchy. So you can find a link down in the description. One of these cards up here. There's a free sampler. You can go download stuff to see if it's something you're interested in, and you can help support your favorite nerds.
All right. So as I stated, with my particular game, this is wrapping up my 3rd campaign. Campaign 2 was the Curse of Zoltan. I don't know why we always label these things, but it's fun to kind of have them so that this is your little adventure. Curse of Zoltan was absolutely almost a railroad style adventure. It was 12 sessions, and it ended with them fighting Zoltan. Zoltan was this, wizard lich at this point in time, stuck at the top of his tower, and he was enacting a ritual to, call forth this, Cthulian aberrant type of beings because they promised him power. But all in all, it was a lie. The ritual that they gave him to summon power was to call forth these aberrations and to literally rip them out of the cosmos and bring them into this world. Yes, it brought power to this particular plane that he could claim, but it came in the form of world-shattering meteors that actually caused a number of sections of the world to kind of like Avatar style float up into the sky and be separate from the actual, plane or from planet, and changed a lot of the cosmos of the world. There's now all of this debris floating up in the atmosphere and in the, the stellar loop or whatever you want to call it. So it had some cosmetic change or cosmos changes to play with, as well as isolation. So I played into the aspect of, some kingdoms had been separated, some things have been completely removed, and how are you going to survive in a world where these things wound up happening? So I set up this kind of almost, interplanar inn that allowed the players to kind of go from location to location to be able to get into all of these floating continents. I set, a dangerous, premise or like rule for the game that regardless of what happens, if you go off the edge of one of these continents, if you don't have a fly speed, there is no max of, 20 die 6 falling damage, you're dead, because I don't care how much feather fall you have, falling thousands of feet, you're done. So it was more of a thing. And I put enough things there to kind of say, look, just be careful. We only had like one session that was really dealing with the edge, and I didn't play any tactics of, well, I'm just going to kill you this way.
We spent a lot of time thinking about ways to not die that way, though, and have things to prevent that from happening. I think, like, everything from having some kind of something that will allow you to cast fly to, I think the one fighter made sure to carry at least one javelin with a rope tied to it at all times.
So, like, flying carpets, an owl that could be summoned. I think at one point in time there was talk of, trying to look for a flying broom. So, like, all of these things, there are already stuff that exists. So getting access to that was not difficult. The last game ended at level 10, so I bumped them to level 11, and this went from 11 to 16, and it wound up getting into a, multi-continent climactic battle, fighting a number of aberrations, befriending a number of aberrations along the way. The final battle was against a 6-armed, spellcaster, very Cthulian in appearance. I actually wound up having a Hero Forge mini printed specifically for this guy. And then I had 2 Tarrasque-esque kind of miniatures that I had been looking to use for a while. I'm like, all right, this is going to be great. So I powered down the Tarrasques, put in this spellcaster, and had an absolute blast in essentially a battlefield of the cosmos, because they were away from the actual land, because they went to where this, Cthulian being was to defeat him before he could completely come into this plane of existence.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't feel like this nor the other campaign were particularly railroady. I mean, the first one, well, actually the second one, but the one, before this was very linear in design, but also like there was a lot of buy-in from the players. So
100%.
We wanted to do that story. So at no point did we ever butt up against any rows anyway. The premise was set up in session 0 in such a way that it really made us want to do this thing anyway. The second game, definitely a lot more sandboxy.
And it was 20 sessions long, so we played that one for quite some time. And I had an absolute blast with it. It sounded like...
Stop! We have our second Kickstarter ready to go. Check the link in the description.
Add 250 magic item tarot card to your gaming resources right now.
Mageforge are magic items from our very own games and minds ready to use in your game.
So check it out, back it, follow it, whatever it is that you need to do.
and get on that list. Stay nerdy. Yeah, I mean, honestly, Ted is going to keep running this game ad nauseum. I think
I was planning, to run it for about another year and take it all the way to level 20. But Dave threw a monkey wrench into that plans, which I was completely fine with.
Yeah, so I mean, the newer thing that we've kind of been doing is we kind of like predetermine how long our games are going to be, and we just hadn't done that this time around. It's been an effective tool in our own games to seeing Story arcs actually seeing the completion and games not falling apart. Maybe it's because we only game once a month. I don't know, but the combination there of something in there makes our games get to the end now.
Yeah.
But I had mentioned to Ted, I was like, well, what if we switch groups, right? Like, because, and by switch groups, I mean, you run for the group that I'm running for, and I run for the group that you're running for, because this would give Ted an opportunity to be a player in that other game with people that he's only run games for, and and it would give me a chance to run for some people that I've never run before as well, and then vice versa in the other group. Also, my wife, Ted's sister, actually plays in the one group. So, usually I'm the GM for the games that she's in, and this would give me a chance to play in a D&D game with her as well. So that was definitely, some things that we wanted to do. And that's why we switched things up and decided to all right, can we coordinate an ending so that our games end in the same month?
Yeah. So it was absolutely fantastic. At the time of recording this, literally, the Saturday prior and the Saturday before that, we wound up having these, kind of epic conclusions that allowed everyone to be like, all right, what is the narration for, going forward? Or, if, because neither of the campaigns went to level 20, there could be a story beat of, well, if you wanted to pick back up, there is still room for growth. There is still places a story could go. So it was definitely a lot of fun. So if we wound up flip-flopping again, we might move on to something else, or, we might come back to these campaigns.
Yeah, so in the campaign that I ran, Court of Worms, it is kind of dragon-centric, but they're not your typical Monster Manual dragons. These are celestial beings that they all have a hybrid human form, human-esque form, right? They kind of, in their humanoid form, they kind of look like a combination of elf, dragonborn, and celestial creature. So, which is really odd, because in this valley that's kind of cut off from the rest of the world, the predominant species are all reptilians and amphibians. With the humans that are there, they live in less advanced societies technologically, and they're more like hunter-gatherers, and they don't have cities and towns in the more traditional fantasy way. And then also the main religion for these races is more based on the elements, the 5 elements, which is kind of taken from some Asian mythologies and stuff. It is kind of sprinkled and spread throughout. So we kind of start off with this storyline where all the players are connected via they have the same mentor, this druid who turns out to not really be who he said he was. And then something happens to him real early in the game, and they're trying to help him. And as it kind of comes out that, he's actually one of these celestial dragons that was never elevated to the emperor status. So he doesn't have his own city to rule, because there's 4 cities. 3 of them are ruled by emperors and 1 by an empress. One of them tried to turn on everybody and murder most of the people in their city in this ritual in order to take over the valley.
And he failed.
And he failed. So, the premise for the story is actually he's come back, and he inhabits his spirit inhabits the body of Penjad, their mentor. And then the climax of the campaign is this villain Ignar confronting the Empress Briella. And, it's this climatic battle where the players have to protect her physical form as they astrally battle each other. And then at the end of that, what happens is they call forth which is called the Court of Worms. And this is this holy site in this valley where all the celestial dragons will gather. And they will all, and as well as each of the city will send delegates to it to decide the fate of what they're going to do. And, it looks like, as the campaign ended, the Val's going to go to war with Ignar. In the meantime, like, he's recruited dark elves and demonic forces, and, who knows what else he has, up his sleeve. Now, it ended with the players accepting to be Briella's champions. So if we pick this campaign up, it'll start with the Court of Worms and then championing the Empress. So I felt like, that seemed like a good place to end this campaign. Like it would have took a while if we went into the next phase of the story. And also you guys could have been like, nah, we retired. Like, it's time for new heroes to handle this thing.
One of the things that I absolutely loved is, I'm not trying to, be cocky. I have a lot of experience, playing, role-playing games. But going into the finale of this game, I'm like, I really don't know what Dave is going to do here, because the adversary, the spirit of Ignor, possessing the body of our previous master, is so far beyond our capabilities. We were level 8. We couldn't take an ancient dragon, let alone an ancient dragon evolved to a deific status. So I'm like, all right, there's no us fighting them. But we were looking to go to have this conversation with one of these other empresses, Brianna, Moontalon, and I'm like, okay, we go talk to her. She fights the dragon, or she gets the other dragons to fight the dragon. What do we do? So thinking about what the next step is, I was like, all right, what is he going to do? But as Dave is describing, all right, we're fighting these minions, which were abundant and powerful and, to some extent, really kicking our arses, but then to have these two spirits, fighting above us, and every round he's narrating this kind of stuff, and at any moment, something could happen. What if he defeats, her? Does he wipe the floor with all of us, or be like, you are so far beneath me, I'm just going to leave and go take on the next one? So there was this, unspoken tension, and I was afraid to say anything for fear of having that affect the other players, because I know that some of the people in that particular group are fairly new and have, novice experience with D&D, like my sister and, one of the other players. So they might not even been thinking about what happens if. So I'm like, I'm just gonna just sit here and grit my teeth and pray that all goes well.
Yeah, and that game was 16 sessions. We started at 3rd, ended at 8th. And I'm hoping to get an opportunity to take it up again and kind of go into the next phase, the next chapter of that story. And that's the way I was kind of looking at it. Even if you've read chapter books, and sometimes they're broken down into individual books within the book itself.
Yeah.
And I kind of saw that okay, you guys did book 1 and all the chapters of that contained, and now we have book 2 ahead of us that we could delve into. And also, that game actually fell behind a session or two as well.
Right.
Not in the sense of number of sessions we did, but where I thought you might be, in accordance with the story beats that I had kind of planned out. And that's the thing, that's the whole thing about running D&D games, right? And RPGs in general. You never know what your players are going to do. Something you plan for a session, they may go through the whole thing, and it's 30 minutes went by. Crap, what do I do now? Or you might be they barely tackled anything that I had planned, and you're like, oh, we're gonna have to push this to the next session.
Oh crap! They went on a shopping montage. That ate up an hour and a half of the 3 hours that I had planned. Now what? Do I have time for a combat? Do we start off the next session with the combat that I had initially planned for this time? And that is always the fun and the flow of sitting behind the GM screen when you've got these moments where it's chaos. You don't know what the players are going to do. You don't know where everything is going to fall until you get there. And as I had kind of said, I had planned out with campaign 2 in a very structured, almost pre-written adventure style thing, whereas this one was definitely more free form and allowed more player goals to come into it and to just be like, all right, I'm going to go where the story takes me and you guys can make your decisions, as opposed to like laying out everything, session by session. No, okay, well, when this one ends, I'm going to end it in such a way that I know what your next decision is based off of character goals and, again, that session 0. Whereas this time I'm just like, nah, I'm going to let this float. You guys tell me where you want to go. And, trying to quote unquote fix the world, with all of these, floating continents, that it's not really going to be easy to just undo that.
Yeah, I mean, we fixed a little piece with a divine intervention roll, which had some unforeseen consequences to that. Because apparently when you put 2 pieces of massive land back together and they've been separated for a very, a decent amount of time at this point, other inhabitants had moved in.
Yeah.
It got messy.
It got messy. And, I wanted to, have it be... The world evolves, the world changes. So when new land becomes open for habitation, things moved in, and things that were essentially underdark at one point in time, and now there's a cavernous opening.
Now they're overdark.
It's like, okay, it's there. So when the player decided, very absolute tail end of a session, is like, all right, I'm a divine inspiration, or the divine intervention. He rolls it and gets under his level, and it's like, holy crap. So I'm like, all right, we're going to pause here. We'll see what winds up happening next time. And I took some time to think about it. There were a couple of things, thrown out by, some of the players in the game. And, I'm like, all right, what comes to the table? And I'm like, all right, we'll take this moment. And you have a brief conversation with your deity. And the deity says that there are too many things in motion, but I can fix one of them. I can set one aright. You tell me, which one you want moved. And he made the selection and is like, regardless of what you choose, there are going to be consequences of your decision. Is this what you want? Player said yes. And while the conversation took several minutes in real time, it was a conversation with a deity. It happened like that. But, the continent, re-emerged, back into the planet, and all the people that were living there, as, you hear thousands of people's lives, ended at this moment. He's like, oh, what?
Yeah. The funny thing too, like with my game, was I anticipated that last battle that we kind of did for the last session happening the session before. And we had taken off October because another player wanted to do like a Halloween one-shot. Mm-hmm. So back in September, I anticipated like that happening. So much so, right? Like I take the maps that I make in Dungeon Fog that I use in our games, and I'll just throw them up over on our Patreon so that people can just see them. I mean, they're not amazing, fantastic. Like, I don't think anybody's coming there just for the maps, but I'm just like, hey, this is a thing I'm doing if you guys just want to take a look at it. And they actually got the map the month before we actually played it, but because it got set back a little ways,
right?
And some of the players in that game are actually Patreons. And here's the thing, like the way that I run games and even Ted runs games to a certain extent is when I say map, it's like I'm not building full dungeons.
Right.
Generally like this is the encounter area is how I do maps, because like, we do mostly theater of the mind until it's time to like break out the maps and minis and stuff. And I've been doing that virtually, which I started doing during COVID. And I was like, you know what? We just Chromecast it to another TV and people can kind of see. And Dungeon Fog has these like tokens and stuff that you can produce, and it kind of gives people an idea of where things are, and it's kind of fun for me to play with the mapping stuff. So yeah, so 2 of them are like, I've seen this before, but there weren't like a lot of like really like hidden things.
Yeah, there wasn't anything about that map that gave anything away. Like,
yeah,
it's not like oh well, here's this creature and that creature. It was just the map itself. So it was a lot of fun. We got to fight the bystanders that were in Brianna's courtroom were like turned into ghosts or specters, and fighting them with Oh, every time they hit you, make a con save. Oh, does that decrease your maximum? It was vicious for some of the players. My character was designed to be tanky and not get hit all that often. So thankfully, Shield was my savior in that in that particular battle. But it's like, all right, I got this. And I did well in that battle, but other people not so much.
Yeah, well, yeah, and so there's 4 dragon statues that got animated and came alive as well. They were just gargoyles. I just used the gargoyle stats.
Sure.
But the thing was a couple of players reacted and moved to defend the Empress, which left the squishier characters in the party vulnerable, where usually they're able to get behind like Ted's character, who is tanky. So where Ted's character did okay, those other characters got wrecked.
Yeah, it was it all had to do with how the initiative rolled, and when a deific being says, protect my body, okay, I'm gonna do that. Like, especially when another deific being is there to kill everyone.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, I got this, and it definitely changed a bit of the fight, but we all survived. There wasn't any actual death beyond the bad guy death, so it's all good.
So now we're talking about the next campaigns. You had come with a primer for people.
Yeah, I mean, we both had some time knowing that the end was coming to say, all right, what kind of ideas do we have? And you threw out several ideas, just throwing it out there into the conversation. But I had already begun typing up my list just because I'm prepared that way. So I'm like, well, I'll put 3 ideas down and I'll actually just print a copy for everybody and hand it out. Even though we've got time in between ending and us having session 0 in January, like so many people were taking December off from our typical games. So this will give everybody a chance to really think and plot and plan, and then from there we'll actually come to the table knowing which one you're voting for, what kind of character ideas you have, rather than being like, oh, now let's do pitches, now let's come up with character concepts. So I thought it was a really good way to start the conversation before we need to come up with the answers.
Yeah, so you came in with 3 pitches: Elemental Chaos, Swamp Gate, and we live on a boat. Right, essentially. And then also, so for the last game, I had actually come up and I had 4 pitches as well. And the Court of Worms was the one that people chose, and then there was also another one was like Exploring Rylor, which is a city of ours that got decimated and destroyed, and basically it's just a big dungeon now. And it's like, do you just want to dungeon delve? Because that's what you're doing here. You're just going to plunder what's left of the city and try and clear monsters. Another one is Weird and Griffin Gaff, and really like Griffin Gaff is like the main town that we've used for a bunch of our campaigns, and a lot of stuff has happened since its inception, where it's now linked to a lot of different kingdoms, and it was like a podunk nothing frontier town to start with, but now it's like this mecca of civilization and multicultural, so it gets a little weird there.
Yeah.
So that was another one, and then the other is Under the Sea, and like I had this premise for an undersea kingdom where people could do that. And so I'm going to take the Court of the Worms off of there, and I'm going to add a 4th option, which is going to be it's going to be Under the Dome, and this one is going to be post-apocalyptic fantasy where the planet has almost become inhospitable because magic reigns supreme, causing these magic storms that are always raging. And there's these like domes of pockets of civilizations of cities where they kind of survive, but like they also have to go out into the world and scavenge. One of the things they scavenge is things that have kind of absorbed the magical essence and energy of chaos magic. And they bring it into the cities, they process it, and they create something called grind. And I want to do like a Mad Max meets Descent into Avernus style game where I'm going to use a lot of the vehicles from Descent into Avernus as part of it.
Just not using soul power.
Just not using soul power. It'll be powered by grind. instead, you know. So like I think there's a lot of opportunities for the players to either be scavengers going out into the wastes or doing like urban style adventures inside.
Yeah, I would be happy running any of those. You know, like going back to Griffin Gap would be fantastic. You know, exploring Rylor. I haven't done a like a serious dungeon delve, bouncing, you know, in and out of town, you know, kind of deal in quite some time. So I think that could be pretty darn amusing. The Under the Sea campaign, you know, there's definitely has some. Novelty is not the right word, but the
Appeal.
Uniqueness.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't done an actual underwater campaign before, so I think, you know, that one might be, you know, completely badass. But then, like,
I'm gonna have to make shark people or use them from a third party product.
yeah,
for
I
sure.
think, you know, like shark people are definitely something that I've got on my mind as well, because, you know, right now, like the leading contender is We All Live on a Boat. You know, I was like, okay, I literally wrote, you know, we all live on a boat, or, you know, kind of island hopping game, literally like 2 half sentences in my opinion. Whereas like the other ones were like full on, you know, narrative paragraphs of like rich setting. But like, no, we don't want that.
We want to live on a boat.
But like Swamp Gate is kind of like this bastion of civilization with you know, artifice really taking over, with some kind of like machinery, you know, cogs and gears. Firearms now exist, but like outside of Swamp Gate is the swamp. And out there is where the awesome resources come from. And it was set up with, okay, well, everybody knows that, you know, the main drive to come everybody here is to retrieve the bog iron, a type of metal that never rusts, and it actually is that kind of like rust red orange color. You know, so it's useful for a lot of things, especially in and around water. But there is the secret stuff that isn't always known, that are other resources that are more valuable. You know, if you're near a swamp, mushroom grows, you know, pretty easily and readily. So regular mushrooms, as well as some, you know, shall we say, medicinal mushrooms are out there as well. You know, and then there's a third thing that, you know, only the hoity-toity really know about. So that was that kind of elements.
And
to
it's
work
also going
with.
to be like a flintlock campaign as well.
Yeah. So pistols, firearms, that kind of stuff is available because it's an abundant society. It's pretty much led by, you know, a council of artificers. So I'm like, yeah, this would be a lot of fun to play with. You know, the elemental campaign is like, well, I've got a whole bunch of cool elemental minis that I want to use. So I'm like, all right, what if literally like the barriers between the, you know, the elemental planes has been rent and ripped open? What do you do when a elemental plane, you know, a rip in the elemental plane of fire lands in a volcano that the volcano's been dormant for as long as the people have lived here? So what does that look like? And everybody's like, nah, I want this boat. And I'm like,
On a
"All
boat.
right." So we'll see what the conversations look like. I'm really at a loss of, you know, these things that I'm start cultivating, and I'm like, all right, I need a third idea. What else do I want to do? Fine, boat.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm down for running anything, anytime. It's just, you know, it's just like I was really entranced by some of these other ideas, and the other players didn't want to do it. So
It's like this thing that I didn't even do a full paragraph for. Yeah, that's what we want to do. Yeah, that's how it goes sometimes. Let us know about your campaigns, startings, endings. You know, do you run open-ended campaigns? Do you kind of close them off in so many sessions? How do you do it? How do you do, like, what are you going to play next? How do you figure that out? You know, share your ideas, thoughts, and theories down below in the comment section with the Nerdarchy community.
while you're down there, don't forget to do all those fun things like, share, subscribe, even go ahead and attune to that notification bell.
Quick reminder, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we drop new videos here on the channel, so come on back and see what's new. Can't wait till then. No worries, we've got you covered. D&D sessions, how to start and end your campaigns.
So until next time, stay nerdy.